So, as we made a video about a few days ago, the Calgary Flames recently re-signed their franchise superstar Jonathan Huberdeau to a long-term 8-year, $10.5 million AAV contract. Now, he's 29 years old. So, this contract goes on until he's 37, and this contract is going to be the start of Jonathan Huberdeau getting paid. Because the past few seasons' worth of NHL action have seen Huberdeau making $5.9 million a season. Now, this contract is a pretty interesting one, because for the first few years you're probably going to get a lot of production out of it. Huberdeau is a 100-point caliber player who had 115 points in last season's worth of NHL play, and he is one of the top playmakers in the entire NHL. Now, there is a debate that says, hey, as Huberdeau gets older, is he going to be able to play like a $10.5 million caliber player the entire span of the contract? And it's very fair to say that he's probably not going to be able to do so. I kind of doubt it if he's going to be 37 years old putting up 100 points per season still. But for the time being, you have yourselves a good player, he is a very talented superstar, and he's making an amount of money that is somewhat appropriate to the production you're going to have from this player. Now, with Jonathan Huberdeau as a 29-year-old player that had been underpaid his entire career, who's just coming off a 100-point pace season in the books, let's talk about how this actually affects another one of these types of players who is also 29 years old, who has 1 year left at $5.25 million a season, and who also was a 100-point pace caliber player. Vancouver Canucks superstar J.T. Miller. Miller had 99 points, 80 games played, 32 goals, 67 assists, and, as we said, he's making $5.25 million a season until the end of this upcoming year. 29 years old, 6'1", 218. While Jonathan Huberdeau is one of the top playmakers in the entire National Hockey League, J.T. Miller is not far from being a very effective player himself. I mean, you don't get 99 points as a bum now, don't you? Miller's an interesting one because we've been talking about for months the idea of him getting traded away, mostly due to the long-term projectability of whatever contract it is that he gets next, and how that contract would coincide with the window of opportunity the Vancouver Canucks have. Lo and behold, this team isn't really in win-now mode, quote-unquote, and you could project guys like Pettersson and Hughes and Besser to be getting better as the years go on. Therefore, is it really all too valuable to have somebody who is a 100-point player making, let's say, $9 or $10 million a season for 8 years in JT Miller? You also have the idea that says that Miller doesn't really have a playstyle that is projectable into the long term, like you saw Jamie Benn, for example, who plays a more physical, gritty, board battles type of game while also producing points. Miller is a lot more in the same vein as a Jamie Benn than he is in a Jonathan Huberdeau when it comes to his on-ice play, and that Jamie Benn contract is seen as an albatross today, which is why we have posts like this made on the Canucks subreddit talking about how the Huberdeau signing does not help our JT Miller negotiations. They're the same age, coming off of team-friendly deals. What I wanted to do to you was read this little thread in the comment section because I thought it brought up some interesting points, and just highlight the perspectives as to how Jonathan Huberdeau affects the JT Miller talks. SMC CMS says, "This is incorrect. This incredibly helps our negotiation." Why? Because we shouldn't be spending big money on a player heading into the wrong side of 30. Miller's agent is going to save the Canucks from themselves, thankfully. Medium Yeet says, except we are probably not going to trade him at the deadline if we are in a playoff spot. So if he has another season similar to last year, we are either going to give him the bag or let him walk for nothing. Of course, if we are outside the playoffs at the deadline, it's a different story, but I don't like the position we're in right now. SMC replies saying this, "That's the test for this management group to see if they're making the decisions or if ownership is still meddling. Rutherford has hinted about trading Miller at the deadline regardless if they're in a playoff position or not. But, then again, actions always speak louder than words. If Miller is not traded and not signed at the deadline, that's a 100% ownership idea, and I hope it causes a fan revolt." Now, what does all this mean? Trade Miller, ownership, meddling, playoff spot, whatever, this is what it means. JT Miller is playing for a Vancouver Canucks squad that, honestly, could probably be good enough to make the playoffs next year. Like, if they made it to the dance, I would not be too surprised. It's just, I'm not going to go out there and say that they're a contender just yet because, I mean, you watch the Colorado Avalanche and you watch the Oilers and you watch the Tampa Bay Lightning, and you think to yourself, okay, let's think about whether or not the Vancouver Canucks of 2021-2022 could compete with that, and they really couldn't. They were not that great. So now you have yourselves a team that could maybe make the playoffs. They have Kuzmenko, they have a few other guys that are coming over onto the team. It could be an interesting transition to watch, but this team is not a contender just yet. JT Miller, on the other hand, is a player that is in the middle of his prime right now. He's going to get as much money as he can because, hey, Jonathan Huberdeau just got 10.5 AAV as a player signed on his team, so imagine what a guy like JT Miller could get in the open market. And now you have a situation where the Vancouver Canucks, if they wanted to keep this player and actually have him in his very productive services for the next few years, they would need to shell out the bag now. Okay, not now, but next year, starting next year. And for the Vancouver Canucks, you could debate a $10-ish million winger that is going to be 30 and he's going to be getting paid that amount of money till he's 38. Isn't really what the team should be prioritizing at this stage of their quote-unquote retool on the fly. And I say retool on the fly and not rebuild, because I do think the Canucks have some foundational young pieces that can help them into the long-term future. It's just, I mean, this JT Miller thing is really going to throw a monkey wrench into all that. Quinn Hughes is 22, 23 years old. Elias Pettersson, 23, 24 years old. So it's fair, I feel, to say, hey, by the time Pettersson is 27, 28, 29, maybe that's when the Canucks are going to be contenders. And could the Vancouver Canucks put themselves in that position if they're giving a guy $10.5 million who is going to be 33, 34, 35 even, by the time those days come around? And so with all the talk that Jim Rutherford had, the Canucks president of hockey operations, on the media saying, hey, if it gets to a point where we are not able to agree on terms, we might have to make a non-emotional decision to depart with the player. And I actually really liked that Rutherford said that out loud on public radio or whatever it was that he said that on, because you'd be hard-pressed to find any Jim Benning quote over the last 8 years even insinuating that any of the players that are actually good players could be on the move. Now, I get it, JT Miller, it's a very different and very unique circumstance, but at the end of the day, Rutherford has made it clear in the past that they're not opposed to trading JT Miller. They do want to have him re-signed. They have said several times that he's a good player and they would actually like to keep him, but Jonathan Huberdeau just got $10.5 million by 8 years. This is a guy in JT Miller that might actually go out there and get something in that similar range, maybe something in the $9.5, $10 million range, because he's not as talented as Huberdeau. However, he did almost have 100 points as well. So talk to me in the comments all your thoughts about JT Miller and whether or not the Jonathan Huberdeau signing goes out there and makes things better or worse for this entire situation. We'd already made a few videos talking about, hey, Kevin Fiala, for example, he got traded. DeBrincat, he got traded. These guys got traded to other teams, and you could debate that the return that the Minnesota Wild and the Ottawa Senators got was definitely not in the same area that we thought it would be in. So, we had already made videos talking about how the JT Miller trade conversation was impacted by those other trades, and now we're talking about whether or not another signing is going to help Miller too. It was passable with the Mateychuk contract because, hey, he's 5 years younger, he plays a lot more of a physical, agitative style, and you could say he's more skilled, and he also had 100 points, so he's pretty good, but like, yeah, he's 4 years younger, so it's different. But now, hey, Huberdeau got signed, and that guy's also 29. So, talk to me in the comments all your thoughts about JT Miller and Jonathan Huberdeau. Do you think the Vancouver Canucks should keep Miller, trade Miller, whatever Miller? And if you want to keep him, how much does he re-sign for? Because Jim Rutherford and Alvin and them, they've made it clear they would not be opposed to re-signing Miller. It's just the contract actually has to work out with what they feel is appropriate. And I don't really know if what that is and what JT Miller and his agent would be seeking based off of the Huberdeau contract as a comparable would kind of be in that similar territory. So talk to me in the comments on your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj Rolls 99 Reddit comments, and the link to the thread will be in the description below. And bye.